Hello, Bad-Tempered Badger here to talk about why I voted the way I did in the EU referendum. I am opposed to the centralisation of authority. When all the power is centred around a small area and a small group of people, their natural self-interest easily takes hold, and the way they govern, of course, benefits them most. This is not always a conscious decision, but can be. Some politicians, I would say most, are corrupt. They create deals with large businesses over the average person because it benefits them. Even those who think they are unbiased and for the people inevitably end up making decisions that benefit them and those around them. Governments that are too far removed from those they govern are no use to anyone but those on top. The government of the UK is already too big by itself, so if you centralise most of the authority to Europe, where those in power are not even elected by anyone in the UK, the average person has no hope of any influence. Europe makes rules that benefit Central Europe, because that is what they can directly see. Humans are not designed to live in such large societies, and it really starts to show once things get this big. This is a simple question of scale. It is my belief that once a government is too large to be effectively influenced or understood by an individual citizen within it, it is no longer fit for purpose. For this reason, being part of the European Union is not a viable option. It is just too big, with those making the laws too far removed from those the laws govern to have any kind of insight into their lives. There are too many individual and very different groups and cultures within the EU. A central authority has no understanding of the views, hopes, fears and wants of any but the culture they grew up in. They cannot hope to make laws that fairly represent all of the groups they are supposed to govern. It is simply not possible. Another issue is layers of authority slowing down the speed of response to new things. Once a new problem is found on a local level, it has to be passed up the chain of command layer by layer. With each new layer, the chances of it continuing reduce, as those in charge have more on their plate to deal with. By the time it gets to the top, it will have been distorted, taken out of context, and in the case of Europe, probably dismissed, because a minor local issue seems very unimportant when the running of an entire continent rests on a few people. Dealing with the problem on a local level is far more effective, but usually prevented by restrictive legislation from the top. A good example of this in action is all the red tape around the bovine TB and badger cull issue. A vaccine would effectively remove the problem in a comparatively short time. The process of getting one approved by the EU can take more than 10 years. There is already a working vaccine, which does have certain issues, but is usable. Unfortunately, the EU has decided that it cannot be used on a wide scale until it has met all the criteria for approval across the entire continent, when this is purely a local problem. By the time it is approved, most of the badgers are likely to be dead. I voted to leave because I think the EU is a bloated, corrupt mess, only holding itself together by virtue of having a few countries with large economies supporting the others. It was a bad idea from the start to try to combine so many different cultures under the same banner. It imposes its will over those trapped within it, and is becoming worse with every move it makes. The referendum was very poorly framed, with neither decision being a good one. Not enough information was given, and there was no plan for what to do if the country decided to leave. I think the government assumed that the country would vote to remain, and only presented the referendum at all so that they would have another stick to beat down those asking to leave. I voted based on my principles and conscience, and I hope it was the right decision.